Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis Tran, and I use the pronoun he, him. I'm an Asian man with black glasses, black hair, wearing a black pattern shirt underneath a navy blue shirt and khakis brown pants. And I want to begin by thanking Amber, Jennifer, and the Disabled Student Leadership Team, and everyone else who helped make today possible and invite me to be here. It's truly an honor to be here and with you and celebrate this incredible milestone. Take a moment and really let that sink in. You did it. Not just a degree, not just the classes, not just the papers, project, presentation, exam, and late night. You made it through a world that often wasn't designed with you in mind. You navigate accommodation, medical appointments, inaccessible systems, uncertainty, self-doubt, and all the invisible labor that disabled students carry every day, and you kept going, and that deserves to be celebrated. Before today, I found myself reflecting on what organizations like the Disabled Student Union represent, because for many students, DSU isn't just an student organization. It's often the first place where disability becomes community instead of isolation. The first place where people stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, who's are my people? The first place where people discover they don't have to navigate everything alone. And that's something we're celebrating today. Not just your graduation, but the community you built together along the way. As I prepared for today, I found myself reflecting on where I was 11 years ago. 11 years ago, I was sitting where many of you are now. Excited, hopeful, proud, and I'll be honest, terrified. I had just graduated from UC Irvine as a first-generation college graduate with a degree in public health policy. Like many graduates, I thought I was supposed to have everything figured out. I thought I needed a 5-year plan. Looking back, I didn't think I had a 5-month plan, even know what the next day would bring. Honestly, and that's probably a good thing, because some of the best opportunities in my life were things I never could have planned for. I thought my major would determine the rest of my life. I thought successful people pick one path and stay on it. What I didn't know was that some of the most important parts of my story hadn't happened yet. I know I was autistic. I know I had ADHD. I hadn't found disability community. I hadn't fully embraced my career identity. And certainly I didn't know that my career would eventually take me from public health through healthcare, technology, disability advocacy, nonprofit leadership, media, entertainment, storytelling, consulting, and community building. If you had shown me what my life today was like, I probably wouldn't have believed me. And honestly, that's one of the greatest gifts life has taught me. Because not knowing what's next isn't a failure, sometimes it's a possibility. Today I'm going to share 3 lessons I've learned over the last 11 years. The first is about community, the second is about uncertainty, and the third is about owning who you are. Because there's one thing I hope you remember of today is this: you're not behind, you're not broken, and you don't need to shrink yourself to belong. Lesson 1, community. Community is not something you find, it's something you build. When I talk about community today, it's because I understand what it feels like to grow up without enough of it. My father passed away when I was young, at the age of 13. Years later, I would also lose my grandmother, who played an important role in my life. Like many families, mine was complicated. There was disagreement, fractured relationship, built on survival, period of instability. I learned about loss, grief, uncertainty, and loneliness much earlier than I wanted to. I also didn't have many close friendships growing up. Long before I knew I was autistic and ADHD, I experienced the world differently. I often felt like I was on the outside looking in. I wanted connection, but I didn't always know how to find it. So I did what many disabled, neurodivergent, and marginalized people learn to do. I adapted. I masked. I figured things out on my own. I became hyper-independent. And honestly, I didn't arrive at those beliefs by accident. Growing up in a Southeast Asian immigrant household, I learned early that vulnerability could be dangerous. Keep your head down, work harder, don't burn anyone, just keep going, At the same time, I was growing up in a society that often viewed disability through a medical model as something to fix, overcome, or hide, like it was my fault. So I adapted even more. People often praise me for being resilient, but looking back, what made people call resilience was often self-protection. What looked like rejection or independence was often fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being loved, fear of being a burden. I became what many people call a lone wolf, not because I wanted to be, because I thought I had to be. Looking back, I realized I wasn't building strength, I was building armor, and while the armor protected me, it also kept people out. Disability community changed that. Neurodivergent community changed that. Queer community changed that. For the first time, I met people who understood experiences I had struggled to explain for years. People who gave me language to things I carried inside. People who showed me that I didn't have to earn belonging. The disability community taught me something I wish I had learned much earlier. Interdependence is not weakness, it's humanity. And that's why I believe so deeply in spaces like this Able Student Union. Because to our many of you, DSU wasn't just a student organization, it was community, it was belonging. It was the place where you realized you weren't alone. Maybe it was the first place where you didn't have to explain yourself. The first place where someone understood your access need. The first place where your disability wasn't treated as a problem to solve. And you're feeling nervous about leaving that behind. I want you to know that's normal. Because you're not just graduating from UCLA, you're graduating from a community that helps shape who you become. But here's what I've learned. You're not leaving the community behind, you are carrying it forward. The strongest safety net isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you build. And if you didn't grow up with one, that doesn't mean you're destined to navigate life alone. It means you have the opportunity to create one. One friendship, one mentorship, one relationship, one act of care at a time. Lesson 2. The world got disability backward. Growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, representation of disability and neurodivergence was almost non-existent for me. I didn't see disabled Vietnamese American, I didn't see autistic adult, I didn't see queer disabled professional, I didn't see people who openly talk about disability pride, neurodiversity, accessibility, or disability justice. The prime example of disability I had growing up was my father. My father was disabled, creative entrepreneurship, and deeply intelligent. But I also watched how the world treated him. I watched disability become the first thing people saw and the last thing they understood. I watched an actual system and outdated policy limit opportunity. I watched assumption about disability shape what people perceived was possible for him. It took me years to realize that the problem was never my father. The problem was a society that struggled to imagine disabled people living full, meaningful, successful lives. At 17, I was diagnosed with glaucoma. At 27, I was diagnosed with autism. Later came ADHD. Though diagnosis didn't change who I was, it changed how I understood who I was. I stopped asking, what's wrong with me? And started asking, what support do I need? What strength do I already have? And what became possible when I stopped fighting myself? When I graduated 11 years ago, I thought my biggest challenge would be finding a job. What I didn't realize was that many disabled people aren't simply navigating careers, we're navigating systems, healthcare, insurance, medication access, housing, transportation, and accessibility. For years, many of my career decisions weren't just career decisions, they were healthcare decisions, they were survival decisions, and for a long time I thought that meant I was behind. Now I sense that's something different. I wasn't behind. I was carrying a barrier many people couldn't see, and made you know exactly what that feels like. That's why I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago. The world got disability backward. For a generation, disabled people have been viewed as liabilities. I think disabled people are some of the greatest innovators on the planet, who spend their entire life adapting to systems that weren't designed for them, who constantly find creative solutions, who learn how to navigate uncertainty every day. Disabled people do. We've been innovating our entire lives. And that's why, despite all the conversation about AI and the future of work, I'm hopeful. AI can automate tasks, it can generate content, it can process information, but it cannot replicate lived experiences. It cannot replicate community. It cannot replicate human connection. The future belongs to people who can solve human problems, build relationships, navigate complexity, and create belonging. And those are things disabled people have been developing our entire lives. You're not a liability, you're an innovator, so think like one. Lesson 3, stay curious and own who you are. As a first generation college graduate, I carry a lot of pressure. Many first generation students know what it feels like to enter spaces your family never had access to. You become a translator, a bridge builder, a cycle breaker. And when you're disabled, neurodivergent, queer, low income, or otherwise marginalized, that journey can feel even more complicated. Because sometimes you're not just navigating a path, you're creating one. You're becoming an example you never had. For much of my life, I thought success meant I'd become more acceptable, more employable, more understandable, more normal, less disabled, less different, less me. And something shifted. I stopped asking, how do I fit into the room? And started asking, what do I uniquely bring into the room? And that question changed everything. Because the thing I spent years trying to hide became the foundation of my work. My disability, my neurodivergence, my lived experiences, my cultural identity, my perspective. And I want to give you all permission to do something I wish someone had given me permission to do 11 years ago. Stay curious. Your major does not define you. It is a starting point, not a destination. You do not have to choose one thing and be that thing forever. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to pursue multiple passions. You're allowed to have multiple careers. You're allowed to build a life that reflects the fullness of who you are. People sometimes ask me how I end up doing so many different things, from public health, healthcare, technology, disability advocacy, entertainment, media, storytelling, consulting, and community. And honestly, from the outside, it probably looks non-linear. But when I look back, I see one consistent thread. It all started with a simple desire to help people, to create the support, representation, belonging, and opportunity I often struggled to find growing up. My lived experience informed that mission. The mission stayed the same, the methods evolved, the why stayed consistent, the how determined remained open. I never boxed myself into one path, and many of the opportunities that shaped my life were things I never could have predicted. I didn't plan to become a speaker. I didn't plan to be consulted on the first autistic character in a children's television show. I didn't plan to write and star in a short film, and I didn't plan to have this very such diverse career path. Most of these opportunities were part of the master plan. They emerged because I stayed curious, I stayed open, I continued learning, I built relationships, I followed my interests, and when opportunity aligned with my values, I was ready for them. That's one reason I don't worry too much if some of you don't know exactly what's next. Because 11 years later, I can tell you that some of the most important opportunities in your life may not exist yet. Some of the jobs you'll have haven't been created yet. Some of the communities that will shape you haven't been built yet. And some of the people who will change your life haven't entered it yet. And that's okay. You don't need a perfect roadmap. You need curiosity. You need community. You need enough courage to take the next step. Looking back, my journey has been unexpected, but also been deeply fulfilling. Not because everything went according to plan, but because I gave myself permission to grow beyond the plans I originally had. Earlier this year, I wrote and starred in my first short film, Crosswalk. Not because I thought I was a filmmaker, but because I wanted to be part of the change and representation I wish I had growing up. Growing up, I already saw disabled people living full, multidimensional lives. I already saw people who looked like me. And because I couldn't see it, I couldn't imagine the possibility of it. That's why representation matters, not because it solves everything, but because possibility expands when we see it. Sometimes one story changes what we believe is possible. Sometimes one person changes what we believe is possible. And sometimes one community changes what we believe is possible. And my hope is that somewhere in my story you hear possibility. Not because I think you should follow my path, you shouldn't. Your path will be uniquely your own. But because I hope you leave here with a broader sense of what is possible for yourself. As I look around the room, I don't see people who need fixing. I don't see people who need to improve their work. I see leader, artist, researcher, advocate, entrepreneur, educator, community changemaker. I see possibility. 11 years ago, I thought graduation without having the answer. Today, I think graduation is having enough courage to keep asking questions, enough courage to stay curious, enough courage to keep becoming yourself, enough courage to build community wherever life takes you next. Some of you may know exactly what's next. Some of you are still figuring it out, and both are okay, because some of the most important people you'll meet haven't entered your life yet. Some of the opportunities that will change your life may not exist yet. 11 years, I couldn't imagine the life I'm living today, not because I lack potential, but because I lack examples. My hope is that somewhere in my story you heard possibility. Possibility for your future, possibility for your community, possibility for the lives you'll help shape. The strongest safety net isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you build. The future doesn't belong to people who fit in, it belongs to people who help create a world where more people belong. So keep building community, keep taking up space, keep staying curious, keep becoming more of yourself, keep being the change and reputation you needed when you were younger. Congratulations, UCLA, DSU, Class of 2026. And remember, none of us get here alone, we're stronger together. Thank you.